Hi, I'm Angus Kress Gillespie, your host for Old Ways in New Jersey. I'm here with Tony DiGerolamo, author of the short novel, The Pineys, Book 1, My Cousin, the Piney. It was first published back in September of 2019. Now, this book is a work of fiction that begins by exploring the original legend of the Jersey Devil. But he then goes beyond the traditional story, and he imagines numerous kinfolk and descendants of the original devil. It's a novella with a mixture of comedy and horror, as he writes about a contemporary group of Piney relatives who try to hunt down the devils. This book was so successful that it resulted in a subsequent series of some 17 sequels for a total of 18 novels in all. He's a remarkable writer, and it's my pleasure to welcome him to our studio today. Tony, tell us about your growing up in Lindenwold, New Jersey.
Well, I was a suburban kid, and my dad was from Blue Anchor, which is down near Hamilton. And we would go there every weekend to see my relatives. And that's how I got into seeing Piney stuff.
Yeah. And focusing on book 1 of your series, what aspect of your book do you most closely identify with?
I think the fact that the Galloways have a lot of relatives. Like, I have a lot of relatives. And in my family, we say we have a cousin for everything, and that's what the Galloways have. They have, like, cousins in every aspect of local life.
So, and how did your personal experiences affect this book?
Well, a lot of it is sort of my training in comedy over the years. I did stand-up, I did improv, and I used the improv formula of heightening in all my work now. And that's done a lot of great things for me. It leads me down the path, and I don't have to worry about the ending until I see it.
And I've been reading book 1 of the Piney series, but I see you also did comic books. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, back in the 90s, I did a Jersey Devil comic book based after the legend. It was really sort of the prototype of the book.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a anti-hero kind of character who thinks he's the Jersey Devil and lives in the Pine Barrens. And he was sort of like Batman, except no money.
Yeah. So you begin with the comic books and you graduate to doing novels. Yeah. And how has writing this book changed you?
Well, I think I kind of found my purpose, if that makes any sense. You know, for a lot of times I did various projects and I would travel across the country to try to promote them. But I can only do so much as one person promoting a concept that's very broad. Whereas finally I came back home to the Pineys and the Pine Barrens, and it allowed me to focus on something that was very local, something that I knew very well, and that people locally to me were very interested in. So it was very gratifying to do.
I think you were onto something because our approaches are different. I'm a folklorist studying the legend. You're a novelist writing fiction. But I think you did something rather clever because there's a discrepancy, you might say, in the original legend because Jane Leeds has this 13th child that becomes a devil. And the way the legend is normally told, correct me if you disagree, is that it's the Jersey Devil singular. And so a thinking person might say, now, wait a minute, 1735 he's born, the year now is 2025, 200 or 300 years have gone by, how could he still be around? And it in your fiction, you seem to have gotten around that by saying, well, there's offspring, there's many devils.
Right.
That's a switch between the original legend and your writing. And once you have many devils, that opens up a whole lot of plot possibilities.
Yeah, and it explains why there's so many discrepancies between the various sightings and legends. So there are many different variations, which of course you've probably read in the McCloy and Miller book from '74. Sometimes she has fewer children, sometimes it's a different woman and different towns and all that. So, I've talked to many people who have seen the Jersey Devil, and they all have different descriptions and different experiences.
Yeah, that makes sense, because a legend has to do with belief. When we hear it, the way our minds are wired, we tend to either believe it or reject it. For me as a folklorist, when I'm interviewing people, I try to keep an open mind, which is a struggle, because the way our minds are wired, we tend to accept or reject. Yeah. What's your research process like?
Well, these days I've got it pretty well streamlined. I'll come up with a concept for a story. So, for instance, in book 19, I really wanted to do a story that took place in the 80s. And if you've read the book, you know that Hemingway came up in the 80s because he's an older guy. And I wanted to explore his earlier days, because that's always sort of been a running gag in the series, that Hemingway is just this gregarious guy who just goes and goes and goes and goes. So what was he like when he was even younger and he was even more crazy? And so I was looking at some of the legends down the shore, because I wanted to do something that connected to one of the shore towns. I was looking at Wildwood first, but then I read about the Scindia, and I thought that would be a good jumping off point for the story. So I'm using the Scindia in the next book.
We've talked about this before, but one of the things that fascinates me, particularly in book 1 that I noticed, was you're using famous authors as the pseudonyms for your characters, which is kind of a clever in-joke. If you're familiar with literature, there's a little reward there. How did you come up with that?
Well, I wanted all the hunters to be distinct from the other characters in the family.
Yeah.
So there are, regular Galloways, and they just have jobs, but then the Galloways that are the hunters are a little bit special. And so to indicate that, each hunter is named his last. I take the last name of an author and use it as their first name. And then the hardest one was to work in Kurt Vonnegut. So one of the characters that's introduced later on is one of their ancestors, who's now gone, is Uncle Vaughn. And his nickname during World War II was Guts Galloway. So he's Vaughn a Gut.
Yeah.
Vonnegut.
And another kind of insider joke that I picked up on is instead of Ong's hat, it becomes
Abe's hat.
Abe's hat, yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to have a fictional town for the characters.
Yes.
But I wanted to originally use Chatsworth, but then I realized that maybe people in the town might get mad at me, all the crazy things that happens in the book. So I decided to do a fictional town, and that lent itself to other aspects of the Pine Barrens. So the running gag in the series 2 is somehow Google Maps missed Abe's hat when they were doing Google Maps. So that's why you can't find Abe's hat on a map. But Abe's is supposed to be next to Leeds Point. And then in book 12, I mentioned kind of how the origin happened. So the origin of Ong's hat, you probably know. Ong's hat, when Jacob Ong got to the spot, he threw his hat in a tree and say, we'll build a town there. So I make reference to that in book 12, and he goes to throw the hat, and the characters sort of drive by, and the hat blows away, and well, where are we going to build our town now, Abe? And then, so the idea is that in this world, there was a second settler with Ong, and he moved on to make Abe's hat.
Focusing on book one, how long did it take you from the concept to the finished product on that book, would you say?
Book one was tougher because I was laying the groundwork for the
Yeah.
rest of the series.
Of course.
So I wanted it to be very sort of tight and punchy, and I wanted it like to have no fat in terms of the story. I wanted to just go, 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 go.
And you largely do that with dialogue, I noticed.
Yeah, because my background is in screenwriting, and screenwriting is, when you write screenplays, it's driven by dialogue, very little description.
And it gives it an air of immediacy. I'm here now listening, overhearing the conversation.
Exactly, and then it's a contrast between sort of this country rural area, but characters who are in this very intense thing that just keeps going. So I wanted it to feel like, you're just trying to keep up with these guys.
What was the original inspiration for book one?
Well, after I had done the Jersey Devil comic back in the 90s, I had gotten away and done some other projects, and then I was trying to come up with a new project, and I had read more about the Jersey Devil. I had heard more stories, and then I had read some of the side stuff, and I thought about going back to the comic and bringing him back. But then I realized the comic was sort of limiting in its own way, and it was kind of dark, and I was going through, my serious comic book guy phase back when I wrote it. And I wanted to do something lighter and fun. And so I came up with the Pineys concept because I felt like that was broader for South Jersey, and I could touch upon all those other stories as well.
Would it be fair to say that the comics are focused on horror and the novels are focused on amusement?
Yeah, well, adventure.
Adventure.
Yeah.
Okay. And we talked about the fictional Hemingway and so forth. How did you come up with the voice for these characters?
Well, Hemingway is sort of my idealized version of myself in a lot of ways. Like if I was totally unleashed and had one of the running gags with Hemingway is he has amazing luck. He was born under the luckiest of stars. So no matter what happens, somehow Hemingway always comes out on top. But it doesn't really faze him because that's just normal to him. So he keeps pushing his luck, even though he's already lucky, but he doesn't see himself as lucky. So that's basically what I came up with Hemingway. And then I wanted them to have lots of cousins. So I came up with Milton. He's sort of the quiet one. And kind of just the guy who goes along with everything. And then Shelley was the new one in the group, and she's brings sort of a little femininity to it.
Yeah.
And then Lewis is the fish out of water, which is very important in a narrative like this because we introduce.
So. Yeah, because Lewis sort of stands in for me.
Right.
Because Lewis is the outsider and I'm the outsider.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when Lewis doesn't know what's going on, Hemingway has to explain it to him, and then you find out what's going on.
Yeah, and that gives you the chance to explain.
Right.
Yeah. So are there any themes or messages that you set out to explore?
Depends on the book. So, certain books have some messaging in it, but mainly it's about family and how you always got to back your family. I have this concept that I came up with back years ago during my improv days. I was rehearsing at a place in South Philly, and one of the guys who let us the space, he had friends who weren't in the improv group, but they kept showing up to the rehearsals and wanting to be in the group. And I kept explaining to them, no, we're rehearsing for a show. Unless you want to join the group and come every week, you can't just jump in. But they had this sort of neighborhood mentality that their friend was doing it, so why can't we? And it struck me, and I said, I really wanted to do a story like that. So all the characters sort of have that neighborhood mentality. They're all from Abe's hat, and they're all in each other's business, and they always go along with whatever anybody else is doing. But then Hemingway's the guy who usually initiates everything.
I know you and I have talked about this before. Down in South Jersey, you often go to special events where you can set up a table and sell your books directly, person to person, not through a bookstore, not through Amazon, person to person. But imagine somebody comes up to your table and they haven't read the book before. What would you say to introduce them to, say, book one? What would you say?
Well, I'd say that the Pineys is about a family of hunters that hunt the kin of the Jersey Devil. It's comedy horror set in South Jersey with a lot of local flavor and folklore mixed in. And then I sort of go from there.
Yeah. It's a good sales pitch. Yeah.
I say it's like Ghostbusters with drunken hillbillies set in South Jersey.
Well, I like that. What do you hope readers will take away from your books?
It depends on the reader. Like if you already live in South Jersey, it's sort of getting you caught up into what your local history is about. And if you live outside of South Jersey and you don't really know any of the stories, you're kind of going into that world and exploring it for the first time. So it's a little bit of, it kind of depends on the reader.
Yeah. In my discussions with you, I think I've caught on to some of the South Jersey in-jokes, but some of them went over my head. Yeah. Yeah. Is there a particular character in the series that was most challenging to develop?
Well, sometimes it's hard to give Shelley and Milton their due because they're kind of the sidekicks.
To Hemingway.
Yeah, to Hemingway.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the concept of Hemingway's character. He's kind of like too much. He kind of like steamrolls everybody around him. So it's very tempting when you're writing it to just let him steamroll everybody. So it was kind of interesting writing the most recent book, which comes out in October. It takes place in 1989, and Hemingway's younger, and he's on his way to steamrolling everybody, but mentally he's not there yet. So mentally he's still getting manipulated kind of by his cousins, and he's kind of not the top dog yet, but he's like on his way. And so it was kind of interesting to pull him back for a minute there and humanize him a little more. Whereas in most of the other books, he's kind of just like, come on, let's go there.
Yeah.
And everybody sort of listens to him.
Take charge.
Yeah.
And is this forthcoming book, is this number 19?
This is number 19, yeah.
Wow. It seems like it's never ending. If your book were to develop for film or television, what would be essential to save?
Save?
To capture.
I have said many times on my videos on YouTube that I want the books done exactly as they are written. And I would do a series like this. I think the problem with movies and TV shows today is, the delivery system has changed and the format hasn't changed. So what I would do is I would set out to do 90-minute movies, which would also be like episodes of a TV show. So I would do 4.
That might work because television, they often do series.
Right.
Yeah.
And the problem is that individual episodes aren't special enough. So they dump like 8, 9 episodes and kind of nobody cares unless they get into it. Whereas if you made them more like my books, which was each book is separate, but they also tie in, they're more like movies. And so it's sort of the best of movies and TV shows. So I would do 4 90-minute movies a year and then go through the entire series.
That might work.
I think so.
Yeah. Are there any passages in the books that gave you trouble?
Gave me trouble. Well, I was trying to come up with an ending for book 13, where the characters actually fight the Jersey Devil. And I came up with something that was kind of pseudo-religious, and I wasn't sure if it would work, but then when it hit me, it sort of jibed with what already exists in Mount Holly where it takes place. And there is a stone altar on top of the mount, you probably know, called the Holy, 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 where the Jersey Devil is trapped. And I looked up a certain hymn and I realized, this'll jibe just nicely.
So you saved yourself. Yeah. What about passages that came real easily?
Well, because it's sort of this adventure type story, Hemingway's tagline, prepare for any eventuality, made sense because he just sort of pulls stuff out of his jacket that he needs at the time. And that came pretty easy. And I sort of wanted a tagline for him so he could say something during certain events.
Now, the characters in your books, they're fictitious, but you've already given it away a little bit, like Hemingway is based on you. Are you free to discuss other characters that are based on real people?
They're not really based on real people, I would say. A lot of them are characters like Lewis is more like another type of character that I've done a bunch of times, which is sort of the scathing, sarcastic guy. But I added another element in that Lewis is very much out of his neighborhood, and he doesn't know what he's doing. And even though he's very sarcastic, it's very easy to undermine him in the setting they're in, except in certain other locations which happen in the book. The other characters, I mean, a lot of the Galloway family, just in general, is sort of based on my overall family. And I would go to a family event and there would just be kids everywhere and there'd be food and it'd just be chaos. And so that aspect of my life I often put in the books when the Galloways have a meeting or a family gathering at the lodge.
You mentioned Lewis. Me as a reader, I kind of identify with Lewis a little bit because I'm an outsider, but I hope I'm not quite as naive. Who was the reader that you had in mind when you were writing the first book?
I think people who like comedy, more dialogue-driven, more fast-paced, more action, where things happen and progress.
Can you briefly describe your writing process?
So I'll start out with a concept. A lot of times I'll start out with the ending. I like to have a good ending. For the Pineys specifically, I like to tie it into local legends. So I start looking up the legends that I haven't used yet in the book. And I start thinking about different locations and which ones. So for book 19, like I said, I initially looked at Wildwood because I wanted to use the boardwalk, but I had already used the Wildwood boardwalk in another book. So I said, why not the Ocean City boardwalk? And then when I found the Cyndia, I was like, okay, this one will work. This is the kind of shipwreck story that I need that has a little bit of intrigue to it. That'll work well with the story. So I ended up using the Cyndia, and then I started doing some research, and I went to the Lifeguard Museum that's in Ocean City, which hasn't been moved since the early 1900s, but used to be on the beach, but now it's in the middle of the island, basically. And the great thing to see was the 1880 map of Ocean City and how, there's an area called North End, and how there's a big section of the island above North End. That wasn't there in the 1880s. North End was the north end of the island. So then when you see that, you realize, wow, this area's really changed. And I thought that would be cool to incorporate in the book as well.
Do you make an outline when you begin?
No. I like to, now I use the improv process. So I start out with characters and a concept. So in improv, you make an offer, and then your scene partner offers something back, and you build on the concept of yes and. So you always accept the offer, and then you build upon it. So that's what I'm doing in my head. I'm building upon my own offers and upping the ante. So if something the character does early on, you're going to have him do it again and again, and each time it's going to get slightly bigger and bigger and bigger until finally it's you push it off a cliff in comedy and make it ridiculous.
I think I know the answer. Do you have an editor, or do you edit your own work?
I edit a lot of it myself. There are tools online I use, and that just use programs to. It goes through the work, and it'll flag misspellings, but it'll also flag you use this word a lot of times. Do you want to mix it up? But generally, it's good for flagging if you use words too many times. And that's a problem if you're writing things, especially in piecemeal, and you're thinking of the overall piece and you don't realize you used, a word like run around over and over again in the last 3 paragraphs, and you got to change that to something else.
What made you decide to self-publish?
I had published through publishers before, and I didn't really have much luck with them. They were nice people, but a lot of times they overpromise and underdeliver when it comes to promotion. I mean, every author I know says the same thing, like, "Oh, my publisher never promotes my work, or else it would be great," or whatever. And I sort of get that. And a lot of them are introverted, bookish people who aren't particularly great at being, marketing people.
Yeah.
And so unless you're in a big company like Penguin or something, they don't really know what they're doing. So I took it upon myself because I ended up promoting my own stuff anyway, even when I was with a publisher and I was making less money. So by doing the books myself on Amazon, I make more money and I do all the work anyway. So what's the difference?
So that's your marketing strategy. Do it yourself.
Yeah. And the deal at Amazon right now is still pretty good, and I can make money selling the books. I can still sell them to stores, so I do have stores that carry my book, but they got to get them through me, so I can get the discount at Amazon.
What advice would you give to a beginning author?
Write what you know is usually the best advice. If I could go back in time and start on the Pineys earlier, I would have. Probably back then I would have been like, "Oh no, I'm going to do blockbuster movies. Shut up." But really, that's what you always come back to. You kind of come back to what you know, and you realize as you refine things over and over again, the best things that you can refine are the stuff you really know all the details to, because the devil's in the details, as they say.
Well, Tony, I want to thank you for sharing your background with us here on East Brunswick Television. I've learned a lot. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.